Survive in advance, my friends. Survive in advance. It took until the 88th minute, but the U.S. was finally able to pull ahead of Honduras in the semifinal of the Nations League and put Honduras away. A Honduras side that came to play, that were scrappy, that were intense, and also required a exorbitant amount of stretchers. The U.S. is going to be playing Mexico in the finals of the Nations League. The Mexicans themselves needed the last round of penalty kicks to get by Costa Rica. Both the U.S. and Mexico kind of squeaked by to get to the final, but it will be an intense Mexico versus USA matchup in the finals of the Nations League. But before that, let's rewind and take a look at this Honduras match that was just about as intense as any CONCACAF match that I can recall. Wasn't the prettiest match in the world, but man, it was intense. All that and more on this episode of the Yank Report. What's up? My name is Sam. Welcome into the Yank Report, the show we talk about the U.S. men's national team, and it's a special time right now because it's tournament time. The U.S. is in the middle of this Nations League window where we're going to have 4 games. We've already completed 2 of them. So far, we are 1-1, but that doesn't matter. The important thing is that we won the one that we needed to win. We beat Honduras, and now we're through to the finals. So if you want to keep up with that, if you want a lot of these breakdowns and just a lot of information about the U.S. from now through the end of the tournament and going forward, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date. And if you want to help out the channel, the best thing that you can do is hit that like button. The like button helps out with analytics. It helps more people see the video, helps more people find the channel, and it's just the coolest thing you guys can do to support the channel. And I appreciate everyone out there who hits the like button. So now let's get into it. I took a bunch of notes. The Honduras came out in a 4-4-2. They had the empty bucket, and it looked like their strategy was really to take away Jackson Ewell as a point of build-up for the U.S. and to bracket the U.S. 8s, to really bracket that midfield, to make the U.S. build up from the sides and make the build-up go through our center backs in John Brooks and Mark McKenzie. While the U.S. came out in our now traditional 4-3-3, the really different thing that we did this game, the big tactical wrinkle, is that we had Christian Pulisic in for Brendan Aronson. And Christian Pulisic had a lot more freedom in his role than we saw from Brendan Aronson. Christian Pulisic was able to kind of roam around and find the game wherever he wanted. Anthony Robinson came in at left back in place of Reggie Cannon. So Des moved from left back to right back, and Anthony Robinson came in for Cannon. So that's the big changes that we saw. That's the tactical setup. Let's get into the game. First of all, my first note is 5 minutes into the game, John Brooks already has run over 3 people. John Brooks came out of this game ready for CONCACAF. He is one of the few players that's really experienced World Cup qualifying on this roster. At 28 years old, he's one of the few players that's experienced a World Cup. John Brooks knows what these games are all about going in, and his intensity level was at 100 starting from kickoff. I can't say the same about all the guys on the field. Some of them kind of grew into it, but John Brooks was there immediately. He was ready for CONCACAF. He became CONCACAF. He was CONCACAF. Now, our first real big chance of the game happened around the 9-minute mark, and that happened whenever, after a nice build up, Serginho Dest plays in the box to Reyna. Gio Reyna dribbles a couple of the Honduran back line, and he has a shot on goal. He has a clean shot on goal, and it goes wide. Now, if you look at the replay, he also has Josh Sargent by himself ready for a tap-in. This was probably the U.S.'s best opportunity, and it came early in the game. This is that moment where maybe a little bit more composure from Gio, and he can either slot that away or he can see Sargent in the box. And to Sargent's credit, he was there. He was in position to score the goal. It just didn't come to be. And I think that was kind of a reoccurring theme in this first half of the U.S., being in the position to score the goal but unable to put it away. A few minutes later, at the 12-minute mark, the U.S. ends up with a corner kick. Sebastian Lletget plays in a corner to Weston McKennie, who finds himself free in the box. He has a free header, but it's just a little bit too tall for McKennie, and he can't bring it down. But this is one of those opportunities that we see Weston McKennie, he put away many times this year for Juventus. Weston McKennie is an aerial threat in the box, and he can score goals in bunches from headers. But this one just wasn't to be. Another clean opportunity that we were just not able to convert early in the game. A few minutes later, at the 14-minute mark, the U.S. has another long spell of possession in the Honduran side. The ball finds its way to Christian Pulisic. He's on the right wing about 40 yards out. He makes a run that I think Ray Hudson would call magisterial. He just does a few Honduran defenders, and then he plays a chip in behind for Lletget, who made a nice run behind the Honduran box. Lletget tries to bring it back in the path of Josh Sargent, but Josh Sargent is beaten to the ball by a Honduran defender. This is another one of those half chances for Josh Sargent, kind of a theme for Josh Sargent. I don't want to pile on to Josh Sargent. He had a decent game. He had kind of that Josh Sargent game where he contributes a whole lot. He had a huge moment that we're going to talk about later on in defense. He's always contributing in the build-up. He had some okay hold-up play moments, but he's just missing that end product that you want from a striker. This is one of those half chances that we see a guy like Daryl Dike or maybe Jordan Siebatcheu, who we're going to hear from later in the game. Those guys might put this away, but Sargent, for whatever reason right now, is just not converting these chances at all. At the 24-minute mark, we saw the first time that a Honduran player hit the ground and had to leave the game. So 24 minutes into the game, Honduras was already trying to stretch it out. Now, this is significant because Albert Ellis immediately comes back on the field whenever he's able to rejoin play, and next time he gets on the ball, Gio Reyna just cleans his clock. Gio Reyna just runs through him. Gio Reyna came to play in this game, in his first real CONCACAF game, and his emotion was high, and he was not going to get CONCACAF'd around. Now, unfortunately, that foul is the foul that leads to the Honduran free kick that goes to the back post, which Zach Steffen attempts to play, but Zach Steffen kind of misjudged it. It gets headed back across goal, and Josh Sargent comes in to save the day with that. He looked like a fish on a hook that somehow hits the reverse header on the back of his head and saves probably Honduras' best opportunity of the game. It was a very scary moment, but immediately after that, I don't know exactly what happened, but a scrum ensues. A Honduran player hits the ground like he's been shot, and then Gio Reyna, who was standing outside the box, makes a 20-yard sprint and then stands over him as if he's Stone Cold Steve Austin and just yells in his face. After he does that, an enormous scrum ensues where everybody on the field is involved, and then Elise and John Brooks just square off, and John Brooks is just not having any of it. John Brooks stays in his face for an extended period of time. This whole scene takes up about a minute 30 of the game. So already this game is starting to get sloppy. Now I think that this is the first time where I can interject and say, in the Switzerland game and then in this game, the U.S. had opportunities early on. They had some golden opportunities, and it's clear that with this particular U.S. team, we're going to have opportunities early on just because of the type of players that we have and the way that we're able to put pressure on our opponents, especially early on in the game. It is absolutely essential that we start putting some of these chances away. If you don't put these chances away against a side like Honduras that's just in it to be scrappy and just in it to just try to get a point out of the game, the longer you go, the longer you get into this game where Honduras is able to stay around, the more and more dangerous they become, and we saw that. A few minutes later, at the 29th minute, Josh Sargent gets a brilliant opportunity. At about the 29th minute, after a nice spell for the U.S., Robinson ends up with the ball from the left back position. He plays in a beautiful splitting cross to Josh Sargent. Sargent's header is saved. It's number one, it was Anthony Robinson's best moment of the match. Outside of that, we didn't see a whole lot from Anthony Robinson. But for Josh Sargent, this is another gilt edge opportunity. This is another opportunity where strikers who are in form put chances like that away. Now, almost immediately after that Josh Sargent header, we get another opportunity. A poor Honduran back pass is intercepted by Gio Reyna. Reyna charges at the back line, and this is something that we saw numerous times in this game. Gio Reyna was fantastic on the night. Gio Reyna was in the middle. He got the ball, and he charged right at Honduras and asked a lot of questions of the Honduran back line. He found an overlapping Christian Pulisic on the left side. Pulisic is able to run one-on-one with the keeper. He tries to beat the keeper through the legs, but the keeper is able to save it between his legs. It was pretty impressive. Now, one thing to note about this opportunity, Sargent was at the back post, and if Pulisic is able to maybe have a cleaner first touch, he's able to chip that into the back post, and it is an easy finish for Sargent. Another one of those moments where if we're just a little bit more poised in the box, if we're just looking around a little bit more, maybe we see that Josh Sargent is there. Maybe we can get that crossover to him and just put that away. And just the whole second half that we had to go through, the whole Honduran players laying on the ground and eating stretchers, we don't have to worry about that because we're up 1-0 at halftime. But unfortunately, once again, we didn't convert. It's not to be. So the last big moment of the first half was unfortunately one for Honduras. Honduras got their best opportunity of the first half at the 44-minute mark. A poor ball from Brooks on the center line gets intercepted and leads to an immediate Honduran counter. Elise beats McKenzie one-on-one and plays the ball across the box. The ball is just out of the reach of an on-running Honduran attacker. This is that one moment in the first half where we saw that thing that we saw over and over in the Switzerland game where our left back got a little bit too high and they were able to play over John Brooks' head and into space. This time it was McKenzie who was chasing down Elise, and I thought for the most part that we were pretty good about covering. We were at least better than in the Switzerland game, but this was a moment where we could have been down 1-0 heading into the half. So the first big chance of the second half went to Honduras, and it was another one of those moments, kind of a carbon copy of what we saw in the Switzerland game. At the 50th minute mark, U.S. is attacking, but the attack ends with just turning the ball over to Honduras and a really sloppy turnover. Honduras is able to immediately counterattack. They play it over John Brooks' head, and the U.S. is immediately stretched. Serginho Dest does not step up with the rest of the line, and he keeps the Honduran attacker on sides. The Honduran attacker is all alone, all by himself against Zach Steffen. Now, to his credit, Serginho Dest, whenever he kind of realized what happened, actually did turn and run and kind of prevent the Honduran player from playing an easy square ball that would have been an easy goal. But in the end, it ends up with Zach Steffen making a big save and keeping the game tied at 0-0. This was a scary moment. It's a sign that the defense still hasn't kind of tightened up and still isn't in a position where, we're really comfortable heading into big games against big teams, especially a team like Mexico. But once again, Zach Steffen's able to save us. We get good play from a goalkeeper, and it's still 0-0. Now, at this point in the game, the kind of tide of emotion is starting to turn. Whereas the U.S. really dominated that first half, around the 50-minute mark, right after that attack, you could tell that the U.S. kind of slumps. You could start seeing that players are getting tired, that things start getting sloppy. You start seeing sloppy turnovers all over the place. And a lot of these turnovers lead to counterattacks. In fact, I would say the majority of Honduras's attacks in this game came from just mindless, just lazy passes. And a lot of players were guilty of this. We saw Pulisic do it. We saw Dest do it a few times. We saw Brooks do it. We saw McKenzie do it. We saw Jackson Ewell do it. And, I haven't mentioned Jackson Ewell yet, but Jackson Ewell was caught in possession a few times. He had some lazy passes that got intercepted. And I think most importantly, Jackson Ewell is on the field because of his passing ability, because of his ability to hit diagonals and really open up teams. But he just didn't do it. He didn't seem like he was confident enough. He seemed like he was playing scared, and he ended up playing square balls to everyone. So the reason why Jackson Ewell's on the field, his passing ability, he just hasn't shown it. So at this point, I got to question why Jackson Ewell's even on the field. I'd like to see Kellen Acosta in that last game. At least Kellen Acosta's a little bit more athletic, can cover ground. If you're not going to get passing ability from Ewell, then you don't need that passing ability as much from Acosta. Acosta probably gets caught in possession a little bit more than Ewell. Probably not as clean on the ball, but at least in a scrum, he can run somebody over. He can turn in a foul, a tactical foul if we need it, and cover some ground. So from this point on, this is whenever the stretchers really start coming out for Honduras. They're able to take every opportunity they have to just eat as much of the clock as possible. And I was actually listening to the Total Soccer Show recap, and Joe Lowry said Honduras wasted 9 minutes of players being on the ground. And you could see the frustration build in the American team. And this is the point where, I haven't said a whole lot about Greg Berhalter coming into this game, but at this point, one of the things I really thought was an advantage for the U.S. men's national team coming into this tournament is the amount of flexibility that we have in this lineup. We have a lot of players who can play a lot of different positions, particularly our wingers who can also play central. We have guys like Pulisic and Reyna, who Pulisic in particular was playing a ton of center midfield in this game, particularly on the attack. And then we have Brendan Aronson who can play inside. So I would have thought at this point in the game where it seemed like the U.S. was kind of running out of ideas in possession and really just kind of hoofing it into the box, hoping for something to happen, that would be a point in the game where Berhalter could maybe bring on Aronson, maybe take off Leggett, bring Gio into the midfield, or put Pulisic into the midfield, and just have another creative player who can ping balls around, maybe look for balls in behind. But that's not something that Berhalter did. In fact, Berhalter took forever to make his first sub. I mean, the first sub wasn't until 75 minutes in. At that point, the tide really started to turn, and you could just tell the look on the players' faces that they were just kind of dead at that point, and they were just out of ideas and looking for a savior. So after that 75th minute mark where we make the changes were Sibachu, Aronson, and Cannon on, Sargent, Reyna, and Robinson off. After about 5 minutes in the 81st minute, we get a moment in the game which would become crucial later on. John Brooks steps into the midfield, and he delivers a ball over the top to Aronson, who's making a run in behind. Aronson tries to head the ball back into the path of Sibachu, but he's not able to really connect with it, and the ball falls harmlessly to the keeper. Now, this wasn't a big moment at the time, but later on in the 88th minute, almost the same sequence occurs, except this time it's Weston McKennie making that run in behind, and Weston McKennie is able to rise up, redirect the path into Sibachu, and Sibachu is able to put it away 1-0. The U.S. gets our go-ahead goal 88 minutes into the game, but at least, we get the goal, and suddenly all the Honduran players are up off the ground. Nobody's getting stretchers from that point on, and it's game on. The U.S. Finally gets ahead of Honduras in this game. But that was really the whole game. After that, the U.S. was able to hold on 1-0 USA. Not the big game we were looking for, not the cleanest game, not the game that really we're expecting from all these class players. But, survive and advance, we got it done. I think this showed us a lot of things. I think, first of all, just the scrappiness of CONCACAF. So many of these players, this was the first time that they played like a real CONCACAF opponent in a real CONCACAF game. So they got that wonderful experience of what it's like, what the intensity is like. They also got to see what happens if you don't convert your chances early on, because the longer that Honduras was able to stay in that game, the longer they were in that game, and the more opportunities they had. As that game went on, Honduras just got stronger. Now, the next thing is that we saw in that Switzerland game how vulnerable our defense is, particularly whenever John Brooks gets isolated in open space. And we saw that a few times in this game, whenever Honduras were able to get counterattack opportunities, mostly because of sloppy passes from the U.S. in the attack. They pinged it right over John Brooks' head in that space, and they had one-on-ones against either our center back or in one case against Zach Steffen. So this is very scary, and this is something that we got to figure out going forward. If our center backs get isolated against Mexico attackers, that's going to be devastating because they have the quality to make that happen, and they have the quality to finish. So that's it for me, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I'm curious to know what you guys thought about this game. What do you think about the game heading forward into the final against Mexico? Let me know in the comment section. As always, if you speak Spanish, please leave a comment in Spanish. If you're watching at this point and you have not yet subscribed, please consider hitting that subscribe button so I can see you again in the next video. If you want to support the channel, the easiest way to do so is to hit that like button. It really helps out. It gets the video out to more people, shares the channel, all that good stuff. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Sam, and this is the Ink Report.